Hey, I'd like to welcome you to another episode of Mission Matters. My name is Adam Torres, and if you'd like to apply to be a guest in the show, just head on over to missionmatters.com and click on Be Our Guest to apply. All right, so today I have Sam Rosenberg on the line, and he's a founder over at Live Ready. Sam, welcome to the show.
Thanks, Adam. Happy to be here.
All right, Sam. So we got a lot to talk about here today. So I love the topic, how to protect yourself and your family anywhere. So this is a great topic and one that I'm always welcome to address and bring up. But before we get into that, I just want to know a little bit more about you as an entrepreneur. So how did you get started in entrepreneurship?
Oh, thanks. Well, it's a funny question. It's a funny story, actually. I mean, really, I started my career as a Marine officer. I got out in 1996. Ended up finding myself, really allergic to bureaucracy. So I realized that.
Hold on, that's a good term. Allergic to bureaucracy. That sounds like a show. Is that a podcast? It should be.
I'll tell you, it should
be. Go ahead, please. Had to stop.
No, not at all. When I got into the Marines, I thought I was going to make a career out of it. I was really gung-ho and everything, but once I got on active duty, I realized that I just didn't like that dynamic, and I had this entrepreneurial drive, but I didn't know it at the time. I just knew that I wanted to be able to do things the way I wanted to do things. And I got out, I landed in like the close protection world, which I always say is a fancy pants way of saying bodyguarding. Got lucky, was working with some incredible people, and ended up protecting a variety of really high-profile individuals, everyone from Tom Cruise to Warren Buffett to Benjamin Netanyahu at the time when he was a former prime minister. And it was an interesting time protecting some of these highest-profile people on the planet in many ways. But I developed a personal philosophy that, to me, it's good to have a lifeguard, but ultimately you should know how to swim. So in 2003, I shifted gears, and I decided that I really wanted to shift gears from protecting people and organizations to teaching them how to protect themselves with the same skills and tools we use to protect public figures. And that was the beginning of my entrepreneurial journey. So I started my own company. I started Live Ready. It was under a different name at the time, but the idea was that the foundation of what we do is the same. And it's been now, 23 years, really digging deep into this subject matter, which tends to scare people, but I do a pretty good job of making it accessible and empowering as opposed to frightening. And nowadays we work with individuals, families, corporations, schools, you name it. And we address three real factors there. We address preparedness, how to get ahead of the curve in this regard. We address protective intelligence, so how do you have the right information and not to have misinformation, if you will, or, wrong thinking around these subjects. And also we get into the actual protection. And the primary thing that I focus on really is that preparedness piece, because again, to me, the key is that you should know how to swim.
Yeah. You mentioned that, many people are kind of, I believe you used the word scared or like in this particular topic. Why do you think that is? I'm curious.
Well, I mean, it's, the idea of personal security is inherently a frightening topic. And one of the reasons why I think it's frightening for a lot of people is just the factor of the unknown, meaning that many people believe fundamentally that they are helpless in the face of certain kinds of violence. And whether they want to admit it or they think about it on a regular basis, sort of in the back of your mind, there's always this notion there. And to me, it always reminds me of the story of how they used to train circus elephants. It's not a happy story, I'll warn you in advance, but what they used to do is take a baby elephant, chain it to a stake in the ground, and this baby elephant would pull and pull on that chain until eventually it just gives up. And what this means is that when the elephant is eventually fully grown and it's the largest, most powerful land mammal on the planet, a human handler can lead that elephant around on the end of a rope, and in the mind of the elephant, it's helpless to resist. This is this notion of what we would consider to be learned helplessness, or what I like to think of as the myth of helplessness, is that a lot of people have been similarly conditioned. In fact, I'd say most of society. We are taught, leave that to the professionals, right? Just call 911. But the reality is, in the moment of truth, we are on our own. And the worse the crisis, the longer we may be on our own. So the concept here is that we all know intrinsically that we have to learn how to protect ourselves, and that we want the ability to protect ourselves, particularly, I would say, fathers, parents, people who look at their job as providing and protecting. for their family and their organizations. People who are wired that way intuitively understand this is my job. It can't be outsourced entirely. Mm-hmm. And ultimately, when there's not a lot of understanding around the subject matter, the fact of that sort of ignorance or that perspective of I don't even know where to turn creates in and of itself a degree of fear. That uncertainty creates fear. And when we are afraid of something and we don't really know how to address it, we tend to just go into denial and say, well, I hope it never happens here. I'm just not going to focus on that. And I think that's one of the reasons why the concept of violence tends to be scary. Not just the fact that it is, in fact, a scary concept. Of
course.
But the other side of that equation is not just this sort of societal conditioning that this is always someone else's job and that we are helpless in the face of that. The other notion is what I call the myth of randomness, which is basically this idea that we have been led to believe that violence is random. That, ultimately it's something that just is like a lightning strike. It happens out of nowhere. Someone just snaps. The news media loves to use the term an active random violence. Mm-hmm. But violence is never random. It is actually a process, and it's a process often as observable and predictable as boiling water if you know what to look for and are in a position to see the signs. So in many ways, by understanding how to recognize warning indicators of danger and recognize when someone that you may be interacting with may have harmful intent towards you or may be trying to target you actively, being able to pick up on those warning signs, even when the warning signs are masked or cloaked by a persuasion or charm. The key here is we can get ahead of that curve and recognize the danger in advance and avoid the trouble. And having a sense of preparedness about, well, if it hits the fan, I know what to do and how to do it in a critical incident or in a situation where I have to defend myself or my family. That gives you a sense of confidence on both ends of that equation. How to recognize the danger and avoid it in a very sophisticated way, the way protection specialists do, but also a confidence that I can respond no matter what the situation is. And my conviction, Adam, has always been that it's not about the physical, right? It is to a degree. It's kind of in some ways a physical subject matter. But really, helplessness is not about being bigger, stronger, faster, or the lack thereof is not about being bigger, stronger, faster. What it really is about being able to think and make decisions under pressure, which in many ways is exactly what is key to any business leader, right? Whether it's an entrepreneur or an executive, our ability to navigate difficult situations and make good decisions under pressure is a core skill set of leadership. And it's also a core skill set of parenting. It's a core skill set of being able to protect yourself in any situation.
Yeah. Well, let's go further along that. How can normal people, real people, build confidence around personal security? Like, are there some steps or like how can they do that?
Well, there's definitely tangible steps. And the challenge is nowadays, I remember when I first got into this whole world back in the 90s and even before that, one of the challenges is pre-internet, it was very hard to find good instruction. There wasn't YouTube, there wasn't social media. It was hard to navigate that field. Where do you go? You could turn to a martial arts school or something, and they would have pieces of the puzzle, but never the whole puzzle. And the challenge now is that there's so much information out there that we don't know which information to believe and which information to rely on. Right. And the key is that you have to choose that information very, very carefully. Who are you listening to? Because your life depends on it in some cases. Mm-hmm. So the answer to your question very specifically is what confidence comes from is experience, okay? And the junction point of whether we have the capacity, for example, if we're talking physiologically, how do we respond under stress? Mm-hmm. We all know it gets harder to think. We all know that the tendency is not to go into fight or flight, it's to freeze, it's to have a degree of paralysis. And we see this all the time. In the most extreme settings, we see it with, say, survivors of mass homicide events or terrorism, or even sexual assault survivors. And what we hear very often is the aftermath saying, I didn't know what to do, so I played dead. And the thing is that we can all understand that dynamic, but it's not a conscious coping mechanism. What that behavior was an extreme paralysis response. So someone finds themselves in an incredibly difficult, life and death situation, and their natural tendency is to freeze. And the extension of that freeze response is this sort of almost total paralysis that ends up manifesting as playing dead. The technical term is called tonic immobility. Think of it as a self-defense mechanism that's hardwired into us, that if we're 1,000 years ago being chased by a bear, well, you can't outrun it, you can't outfight it, so the best thing is to play dead. It's a survival mechanism that could keep you alive if you're being attacked in the wild, but could get you outright killed if you're faced with a human predator. So the concept here is that we never want to lose the ability to think and make decisions. And the challenge is, how do we overcome this paralysis response? How do we overcome this natural inability to process and think and to deal with adrenaline and all that? And it always comes down to this junction of experience. If you have experience, the brain has the ability to follow that pathway and use that experience to leverage it, if you will, to make decisions, or to compare what's going on to previous knowledge and say, how do I navigate this? In the world of violence, the problem is most people have no experience. So, there's only really two ways to get it. You can get it the easy way, or you can get it the hard way. Well, you can get experience the hard way by going out there, getting into difficult situations, hopefully surviving, and then having a powerful learning as a result.
Yeah, that doesn't sound so good. Yeah.
That's not the best way.
Yeah,
not the best way for sure.
Too viable. Yeah.
Or the other way is to sort of rely on a bank of knowledge, right, that has been, if you will, passed down by research and lots of experiences to say, here's the framework for if you find yourself in this situation, here's how you navigate it, and these are the best solutions, and this is the industry best practice. And by virtue of training, you can accumulate that knowledge. It's the same way we learn any skill set. So it's by learning from those who have been there and done that. And so to me, the key is training. And that doesn't mean that everybody needs to go running out and join the local jiu-jitsu gym. What you have to be able to do is understand that training for the real world of personal security, real world violence, real world risk management is a totally different animal. And it always starts with, how do you recognize the danger first and avoid the trouble? I don't know any parent who would rather their kids be great at fighting their way out of trouble than avoiding it in the first place.
Yeah,
right?
True.
So
yeah.
Our whole basis is, let's get ahead of the power curve, right? It's achievable. And even though we're not marinating in this idea that, it could happen anytime, anywhere, any place. I mean, I guess technically it could, but most people live safe lives. Most people are well protected in general. So what the real advantage of this sort of understanding and learning how to go into this role or this world is confidence. It's primal, right? People want to know that they can protect themselves. They want to know they can handle themselves in difficult situations. And most people have never been tested in a violent situation, and they hope never to be. But the concept is, learning these critical life skills empowers you across the board, no matter whether it's a business negotiation or just having confidence in any kind of contentious situation. It gives you a different way of thinking and sort of emotionally regulating when you're under stress. It gives you the ability to de-escalate yourself, which is the first person that has to be de-escalated in any kind of conflict, whether it's with your spouse or a stranger. So the idea of being able to think differently and operate differently and to continue to process under stress is the end goal of all of that experience and training, not just, can I defend myself if I get attacked? That's almost the byproduct. That's the purpose behind the training, but the byproduct of it is, in the event I have that emergency, that worst case moment in my life. The real benefit, if you will, is all these other factors.
Sam, this has been great having you on. I know we're literally tip of the iceberg on what you have to offer, and whether it's training, whether it's tips, and really all of the above. That being said, if somebody wants to connect and if they want to learn more about Live Ready, if they want to follow your content, how do people do that? I
appreciate you asking that because, Adam, I know you always go above and beyond for your audience. I wanted to do the same thing. And as a thank you to the audience listening to me, what I did was I actually had my team specifically put together a landing page where I knew we had limited time. So I wanted to say, if anybody's interested in getting deeper into this, go to the landing page, mission.liveready.co, mission.liveready.co. And what I've given your audience ultimately is something that I only give to my paid clients, but I knew we had limited time. So it's called the Protector's Protocol. And what it is two critical things. Number one is a digital copy of my book, Live Ready, which is a guide to protecting yourself in an uncertain world. And it has literally 20 plus years worth of best practices, knowledge, and lessons learned in a very distilled manner. And the second, almost more important, is a digital course that I normally charge for, and you can't find it anywhere else other than a paying client of mine. And it's called Radar. And what that is really a deep dive into situational awareness. So that I want everybody who listens to me on this show to get better at avoiding trouble. And the first step is to be able to tune your situational awareness. Now, most people think that situational awareness is just paying attention. That's really just a prerequisite. You got to know what to look for, when to look, and how to look. And I teach that in this Radar course. So those are literally free to anybody who wants it, who's an audience member here. As my thank you for having you on your show, and as my thank you to them for tuning in, again, it's mission.liveready.co.
Fantastic. For everybody listening, just so you know, we'll definitely put some links in the show notes so that you can connect and connect with Sam's team as well and get involved. And that, speaking of the audience, if that is your first time or this is your first time with Mission Matters and you haven't done it yet, this is a daily show. You heard me right. Each and every day we're bringing you new content, new ideas, and hopefully new inspiration to help you along the way in your journey. So hit that subscribe, hit that follow wherever you're at, and I'll see you on the next episode. We got plenty more. I'll see you tomorrow. And Sam, thank you again so much for coming on. I really appreciate the service and the work you're doing, and it's been an absolute pleasure. Thank you.
Thank you, Adam.